Lawyers of Reddit, what cases are you sorry you won? This is a repost of my personal worst. I'm thankful that my work is now more fulfilling. A while back I represented credit card companies suing for outstanding debts where we had pretty stringent client guidelines dictating how we handled lawsuits. The bottom line was that we were to be aggressive in court so as to put our client in favorable positions during any settlement negotiations. One defendant was a 40-year-old woman who had maxed out all her credit cards in a futile attempt to pay for healthcare for her husband, who ultimately died of cancer. In total, she had spent something along the lines of $60,000 paying for chemotherapy, hospital stays, and various other bills. She ended up losing her job, husband, and home, all within the span of 3 months. She didn't even bother showing up for hearings or responding to the complaint, meaning my client won a default judgment against her. The worst part? I had to stand up and tell the judge what my client was entitled to: $60,000 for principal amount, $80,000 for interest and late fees, $10,000 in attorney's fees. She now has a judgment of $150,000 against her. I refuse to do that line of work anymore and have made it a point to represent people against credit cards if the opportunity presents itself. Prior to law school I worked for one of the largest debt collection firms in the country. I was in a department that only dealt with post-judgment executions, levying real property, property liens, raiding bank accounts, wage garnishments, you name it. Needless to say, if you were talking to me you were pissed. I did it for about 6 months and swore to myself I would never go into the field after graduation. I felt so bad about it that I worked pro bono once a month at a local court to give credit advice to people being sued by collection agencies. Whenever I see that company's name in the caption, I work as hard as I can for that defendant. I once free-handed a 20-page motion to re-arg for a man that didn't speak English and smelled like he was allergic to showers. That was still a more enjoyable experience than working at that firm. Can answer generally. I am a former assistant prosecutor. Served in a large city. Never felt good when you won a case and an 18-year-old, or younger, kid goes to jail. You do your job. Justice is done. But all the same, you can't help but feel sorry about the circumstances that led to that point. I work in a substance abuse rehab facility. It's really weird when I check in paroles born 1994-95 for coke alcohol use. I keep thinking to myself, man, you're just kids. My father is a lawyer. I asked him once why he didn't do family law anymore. He told me about a case where he was able to get a father full custody of his children. But by the end of the case my father wasn't convinced that his client wasn't molesting the children. Sorry that this isn't exactly what you're looking for, but I'm an intern at a public defender office. One of my good friends is interning at a family violence clinic. Every once in a while we go out to eat and end up talking about cases. But we always do it in the abstract for confidentiality and such. So she's talking about helping her victim get a temporary protective order, TPO, against her baby's daddy while the charges are pending on his stalking and terroristic threats charges. Can't go into detail but it's a terrible situation and she's very sympathetic. My story is about how I was able to get the solicitor to come down on a probation revocation from 90 days revoked and no contact with victim down to 45 revoked and no violent contact with victim. Long story short, we were talking about the same couple. I made sure he got back out on bond earlier while she was trying to make sure he didn't keep terrorizing his ex. Happened like a week ago. Been bothering me since. Good timing on the post I guess. I do patent law. Often I think it sucks that I have defender patent that if the patent didn't exist lives could be saved for much cheaper, or free. Software patents here. I figure if I start feeling too guilty, I'll just donate $1 to the F4 every time I use the word comprises in a claim set. Throwaway account. To protect my identity, I got a mad her set free. Then one of my talentless husks of a daughter filmed herself blowing a sheet he rent singer. The rest is history. 2 sentences I wrote as a junior associate ended up verbatim in the brief and then in the US Supreme Court's majority opinion in Atant v. Concepcion. That's the case where the court ruled you can't have a class action suit if there's an arbitration clause. Basically, the ruling means that a savvy corporation can screw all of its customers as much as they want, as long as each individual claim isn't worth arbitrating. And the government won't let you do anything about it. This is a big deal. Why isn't anyone rioting? I didn't even know what the research was for when I wrote that memo. But I still feel guilty about it. It's like the guy who cleaned Hitler's horse stables. It wasn't bad in itself. And someone would have done it anyway. But I still ended up supporting something evil. I quit a few weeks after writing that memo and went into plaintiff's personal injury work. I have never regretted that change for even a moment. Not a case. But there were times where I would negotiate things a client wanted in a video game contract that I knew would make the game worse. That hurt more than anything else. I know an older successful lawyer who got a rapist off on a suspended sentence. He said the judge seemed swayed by the fact that the defendant had a high-stress job managing about 200 employees. And basically gave him no punishment. The girls, there were 2, freaked out when they heard the ruling and the lawyer felt really bad. Didn't expect a suspended sentence but did too good of a job. He regrets it. I represented the woman in this. Guy and girl lived together for a decade as a couple decades ago. She cheats on him so he leaves town after being together for 5 or so years. He ends up moving to Michigan and ends up getting a good job building cars. The guy ends up retiring a few years ago and gets some kind of ERISA money from his pension. Or a bag finds out about the settlement and ends up suing and getting half of the $sign because she was his common law wife. TLDR, woman uses common law marriage from relationship decades earlier and get half a guy's pension. Divorce case. Custody battle. I represented the wife. She cheated on her poor husband during the marriage. I thought the case was lost after they played a tape of her with the other man. As a last-ditch effort, I figured out she wasn't 18 when the marriage contract was signed. So it was voidable and she got full custody. I did all this while following the lawyer's ethical code. I didn't say a single lie that day. Defendant lawyer here. It was a fatal dependency claim. Mother with 5 children. Loving father taken away by my client's negligence. When it came to pay the dependents, I discovered that the children weren't the deceased father's. Wife had affairs and fathered children to other men. We paid her children nothing. 2 days before the conference where we outlined our strict position, our client gets a phone call from dead father's best friend. Before the father died, the best friend came clean about the affair with his wife. Father forgave him. Told him that he knew and loved them anyway. We get out of paying these children anything. And I've always felt bad about it. Feeling as though I let one of the world's most beautiful humans down in the dead father. Edit. Formatting. Holy shit. This thread is so depressing. So ducking glad I didn't go to law school. And am doubly glad that I live in Canada, so if I or my loved ones get sick, we're not bent over by the medical bills. Holy shit. Some of those people in these stories write in the feels. Isn't there some ethics confidentiality thing that would prevent most lawyers from answering this? Just say allegedly and you should be right. A lawyer allegedly told me this. Lawyers get a bad rap. Sure. There are some bad apples. But the same is true for priests, doctors and teachers. For example, criminal defense attorneys are literally the guardians of our constitutional rights, the last line of defense between the state and the citizens. If you believe in the justice system, then you believe everyone, even those assumed guilty, is entitled to a fair trial. By ensuring that even the most hated get their day in court, they attempt to ensure that the rest of us will too. And most crim defense attorneys, prosecutors don't actually make that much money. Especially when adjusted for hours worked. There are a handful of guys in the country that make insane money. But the rest are solidly working middle class. Lastly, most lawyers don't flat out lie. Their job is to make the other side prove its case. Like most people in an argument, they present the facts and tell the story in a way most favorable to their side. It's up to the judge or jury, as an allegedly impartial decider, to wade through both sides' story and decide what they believe. Not a perfect system by any means, but the best one invented to date. Edit, thanks to the person who gave this gold. Fairly new to Reddit, and I honestly thought this would be an unpopular opinion. Awesome surprise. My English teacher in 7th grade was a former criminal defense lawyer, and he had to take a case for a man who insanely abused his child. He described the kid's skull as it was as if someone had put a watermelon in a bag and repeatedly smashed it against a wall. It was one of his first cases too. He flat out told us that he regretted even taking the case at all. I'm pretty surprised he continued his career as a lawyer. I once had a case representing a pharmacy that was suing a nursing home. The pharmacy had a contract for exclusivity of supply with the nursing home, and the nursing home hired a new contract manager. The new contract manager unilaterally made the decision to sever the contract and appoint a new third party as the sole supplier. My client sued the nursing home for $300,000 in damages, that a lot of medicine, plus another $30,000 in costs and interest. The nursing home folded. We divided up the remains with the other creditors and got basically 20 cents in the dollar. All of the residents in the nursing home had to find alternate accommodation, and about 40 staff lost their jobs. I heard anecdotally that many of the older patients who were confused and had Alzheimer's etc. were very distressed about the move, crying and shaking etc. The kicker, contract failed because they went out of business anyway. Sad face.